Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! Well, I thought we needed a break from all the war talk. And so I wanted to bring you a coffee talk today that's a little bit different. I want to discuss today both J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And, you know, if you were to look up J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and you have a lot of Christian stuff in your feed from the algorithm, then you might immediately be confronted with numerous Christian YouTubers who want to tell you that Lord of the Rings and the Tales of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, are evil books that should be avoided and evil movies that should be avoided because they celebrate magic and the occult, and that they're detrimental and they're really wolves in sheep clothing. And I would say to those people, the only reason you're saying that is because you did not do your due diligence and discover who these two men actually were. Now, J.R.R. Tolkien is the author of the Lord of the Rings series, The Hobbit, and one of my favorite books, The Silmarillion. And to say that Tolkien is a genius is an understatement. Tolkien's ability to imagine things, his ability to convey to the reader those amazing, unbelievable things, his understanding of storytelling and his mastery of the English language is unprecedented. The same can be said of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was the grandson of an Anglican preacher, but his father was a lawyer and his mother a mathematician. And so he was raised in more or less a form of agnostic atheism, where a world where science was the only true belief system and all others were myths and fairy tales. However, at an early age, he became very obsessed with myths and fairy tales. He went on to become a professor at the Oxford University in Oxford, England. And here he was able to meet J.R.R. Tolkien, a much older man. The two of them became fast friends, and they were part of a group of British intellectuals who would meet every Tuesday from 12 to 1 at a local pub, and I forget the name of it, in Oxford. And they would discuss theology and literature and deep conversation. But their main intent was to drink as much beer as they could before they went back to work. Look, not all Christians are teetotalers. Get that through your head. That's mainly a Baptist thing. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't cuss, don't chew, don't hang around with those that do. None of that's in the Bible, but nonetheless. So these Christian men, well, C.S. Lewis was an atheist, and J.R.R. Tolkien, a devout Catholic. And they would have these long discussions with numerous other famous people that would become famous intellectuals and authors. And when I first discovered Tolkien's writings, I was turned on to them by a friend who was just into anything occult, any kind of sci-fi, any kind of fantasy. And he goes, check this book out. You're going to love this book. And I was a security guard at a chicken plant in Grand Prairie, Texas, Pilgrim's Pride chicken plant. And I was trying to stay awake because the night crew would leave, and before the morning crew would get there, I would invariably fall asleep. And I was struggling to find anything to keep me awake. And so I got to reading these Tolkien books. It was the only thing that could keep me awake. I read all of the series of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit twice in my lifetime. And I read the book Silmarillion, which, to give you a hint to the depth of Tolkien, is that the Silmarillion is the creation mythology of Middle-earth. It's their Bible. He basically wrote the Bible for this Middle-earth, this fictional place, before he wrote the Lord of the Rings. So when he wrote the Lord of the Rings, there's all of these references that seem mysterious and he doesn't quite explain, but they're all explained in the Silmarillion. So I became an absolute Tolkien nerd And then later on, I discovered C.S. Lewis and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a series of books on Narnia that I thought were children's stories. But through my obsession with Tolkien, I was able to discover C.S. Lewis. And here's briefly how C.S. Lewis became a Christian. Once again, he, at the age of 17, decided that he was a full-blown atheist. He spent all his time reading the classics in the original language, Greek and Latin, and he was multilingual, and he knew the old forgotten languages. And at the age of, I believe, 18 or 19, World War I broke out, and this would have been 1917. And even though he had a free pass because he was a college student at Oxford, his patriotism kicked in, and he joined the military and fought in World War I. This had a great effect on him. The trauma he experienced in war. He is said to have captured an entire German, I don't know what they call their group, a platoon, regiment, whatever, single-handedly. And he was also wounded with shrapnel that killed all the people that were standing around him in the brutal trench warfare that was World War I. And he came back, and I really believe it was, it was just a realization that there had to be something more than this material world, that there had to be something more than just to live and to die and for there to be no meaning in life. And so at this point, he decides to go back to his roots and to become a Christian, but yet he still couldn't really accept Jesus Christ as anything but mythology. And so that would make him a deist, someone that believes in the idea of God, but not the literal nature of God, or that you can have a relationship with God. And so he left being an atheist, might have been considered an agnostic or maybe a deist, but was not really a Christian, even though he attended Christian church, the Anglican church there in Oxford, on a weekly basis. And he and his devout Catholic friend, another professor at Oxford, J.R.R. Tolkien, during their various interactions would debate this concept at length. And then Tolkien does something that you don't expect from a Catholic. He makes a real charismatic Christian style evangelical play on C.S. Lewis one day when they're walking together. And Lewis is saying, how can you really believe that Jesus Christ is real when you have all this history that predates him of the exact same story? A young man God who is unrighteously killed for a crime he didn't commit, and then is resurrected into life to be the savior of his people. It's a myth that gets repeated, and all of these stories predate Christianity. So obviously, it's a Christian myth. Obviously, Jesus wasn't an actual human. He was a myth, just a continuation of mythology that early Christians adapted. And Tolkien says something that might seem like blasphemy until you really dig deep into it. He says, of course Christianity is mythology. Of course it's mythology. It just happens to be the one mythology that's actually true. Don't. Let that sink in. Then he begins to convey the idea to him that all of the ancient stories that were similar to Christ were actually prophetic foretelling or foreshadowing of Christ. And that the difference between the ancient stories of their time and the stories of Christ is that Christ's life, death, crucifixion, and resurrection transformed the world. And so it was at this point where C.S. Lewis, known as Jack, his name was weird, so they just called him Jack, I guess. But Jack began to that's when he really accepted that Christ was real. And he had a major conversion at the hands of Tolkien. Because of Tolkien's intellect, he was able to pull him past his agnostic, atheistic, scientific mind of reason and matter, and opened his mind to the supernatural. It helped that that C.S. Lewis, or Jack, had a very deep yearning for anything mysterious or magical or supernatural, and he had already filled his mind with much of the ancient writings of magicians and wizards and angels and genies, and he was very aware of it all. And that was, I believe, part of how Tolkien opened up his mind to accept the supernatural realities of a Christian faith, and brought him back to the faith of his grandfather. And, you know, I think those two men are the most miscategorized among evangelicals, that they want to claim that they're responsible for introducing magic and the supernatural and wizards to young people, who then get led astray into Wicca and demonology and Satanism. And honestly, I think that that's a knee-jerk reaction. I don't believe it to be even vaguely true. And the argument that Christians make is that you shouldn't let your kids watch these movies or read these books, because the Old Testament Bible tells you that magic is illegal, that sorcerers are evil, and wizards are to be shunned. And they claim, erroneously, that these works of fiction were written from that perspective, with that in mind, and that Christians, because the stories of The Lord of the Rings, the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, actually are a fictional retelling of the elements of the New Testament. If you look at The Lord of the Rings, it's the book of Revelation. And if you're into that sort of thing, please watch my series I'm doing right now on end times, because I'm going to talk about the type of end time eschatology that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis believed in, because they were not dispensationalists. They were kingdom, dominion, post-millennial. They didn't believe in a rapture. They believed how I believe, honestly. And because that was the classical belief of all Christians until dispensationalism started changing things in the 1850s. So their Christianity has a distinct eschatology, end times belief that is demonstrated perfectly in both of those movies. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, obviously people equate the lion, Aslan, in that movie with Jesus Christ, with his death and his resurrection and his defeating of evil through his own sacrifice. And it's clear in that one, The Lord of the Rings is more based on the book of Revelation as it's interpreted by a semi-preterist post-millennial eschatology, which is very different than premillennial, dispensationalism and the beast and the mark of the beast. And, it's both stories, both The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and The Lord of the Rings, present Christianity in fairy tale form. They present the basic story of their eschatology, their belief system in Christianity, as a fable, as a myth. But the theology is clear through and through. The accusation that magic is to be shunned is also a symptom, I think, of Christians who don't believe in supernatural signs and miracles. They don't believe in signs and wonders. They're dispensationalists that believe that was something that was available to the early apostles, but does not happen now in the church age. And that is opposed to charismatics and Pentecostals who believe in spiritual warfare, casting out of devils, healing the sick, doing the work of miracles and restoration in people's lives. And that's very different than the intellectual Christians who think that doesn't really exist in the world, and mainly because they're so spiritually shallow, they've not been able to unlock that for their own ministry. So they're drawn to the idea that it doesn't really exist. And so their main argument is that this opens the minds of Christians to the idea of magic. But what they're missing is the point. The reason why these two men wrote these works of fiction. What was their underlying purpose? What was their goal, and did they accomplish it? Because they didn't write these books for Christian kids. They didn't write these books for kids that went to Sunday school. And if your kid went to Sunday school and you did the right thing and you brought them up in the way that they should go and you taught them the gospel, then when they watch this book, or movie rather, or read these books, they're going to see the shadows and types of Christianity in it. They're going to see that Aslan is Christ. They're going to see that the battle, the final battle and the return of the king, even the name of the return of the king, is a clear indicator that they're talking about the second coming of Christ, the return of the king. The main character in The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn, is a man who is part God and part human. And he has been banished. And he, after a massive war at the end of that book, he takes his rightful place as the king, the return of the king, and he rules and reigns in righteousness over the people. And so you can see that if you have proper Christian training. If your kid can turn to Wicca and witchcraft and spells after watching those two movies, you didn't do your job teaching your kids, and that's on you, not Tolkien. So why did Tolkien and C.S. Lewis write these books? Why? Well, you got to understand what time period they lived in. I think C.S. Lewis was born just right after, within 25 years of Darwin's book and his thesis on evolution, and that science had was becoming the new God in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, and especially is true today. And atheists did not exist prior to science. That science and scientists and the belief in the material world, and that is all that is real, is this life that we live, what we can see, touch, taste, and feel, is the only thing that's real. There is no invisible world. There are no spirits. There is no afterlife, and this is all you get, is a product of science. Science created atheism as we know it. If you argue with any atheist, he will argue the value of science to you and call you a person who believes in myths and mythologies and claim that Christianity is a myth. But like Tolkien said, Christianity is a myth. It just happens to be the myth that's actually true. All the other myths led to the true telling of the coming of the Son of God and the redemption of mankind and the reconciliation of us with God, and us now becoming kings and priests and joint heirs with Christ, where we will rule and reign with him over this earth in peace, love, and joy. And that is the reality. And so their purpose was not to teach your kids about magic. They're assuming your kids are going to find out on their own if they're looking for it. Their purpose was to take scientific-minded, atheistic people who don't believe in the supernatural and use great storytelling and drama and edge-of-your-seat action and romance and the idea of pure love and courtly love and love that transcends death, love that never ends. Even when you lose someone, the love still remains. These are concepts that are present in both of their writing, and not by accident. They colluded together. They were to some degree co-authors in each other's work. More Tolkien with Lewis than the other way around, since Tolkien was the older one and clearly the mentor. So these people that denounce them don't even understand the importance of those books. Let me give you an example. I once dated someone, and being a Christian and being a minister, a single minister, I had to, I really had a difficulty finding anybody, because I live by faith. I live by faith, and people that are steeped in this material world can't understand or comprehend me. When you look from the outside, I look like a failure. And it's very complexing for people because I clearly possess genius. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant. It's just the truth. I play 12 instruments. I have a documented 180 IQ. I was a childhood chess prodigy. I won't say champion because I didn't pursue it long enough to be a champion. I had other things that were more important to me, like music. And I've done some extraordinary things in my life. My life has been interesting. It's The Perils of an Interesting Life is the name of my biography in the works. And so I don't know where I got off on. I always do that. I get sidetracked. But these men were of high genius. Tolkien and the like, they were of high genius. Oh, I was telling you a story. So when you're trying to date, I am a weirdo in the dating world, right? And I kept running up into two things. One, either someone so steeped in their brainwashing on orthodoxy and what their pastor claims is the truth that they couldn't tolerate somebody like me who is a searcher, a seeker, an open-minded person trying to find a deeper meaning in religion, trying to find the true nature of Christ, and trying to and discovering rather by accident how misinformed, wrong, and ignorant most Christian leaders really are. I discovered that at an early age. They just don't have answers for the hard questions, and I set out to solve those mysteries, and I believe I've solved a great deal of them. I'm creating basically a new variation of Christianity, which I think is in line with earliest primitive Christianity, the true faith of Jesus Christ, and what his disciples really believed. And so, at any rate, I met this person, right, in a public place, this woman that I was interested in. And there was immediate magnetism. And she launches into, I can see dead people. I don't know what she wants. I'm telling her to go away, but there's a woman standing behind you. And she won't leave me alone. I'm trying to ignore her. Most men would run away screaming. Most men would run away with their tail between their legs when, crazy woman alert, boop, 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 back the truck up. But instead, I believed her because here was an alternative. She was not brainwashed by theology, and she was also not blinded by the God of this earth and materialistic and unable to see. She was a believer, even if her beliefs were kind of screwed up. See, I can convert somebody like that to Christianity. I can convert a witch to Christianity, but an atheist is amongst one of the hardest people to ever convert because they don't believe in anything. If you believe in something, I can realign your belief to the true faith of Jesus Christ. But if you believe in nothing, if you only believe what you see is what you get, if you only believe in what you can touch, taste, feel, and smell and hear, if you don't believe that there is an invisible world, if you don't believe in the struggle between good and evil, then you are very hard, very difficult to convert to Christianity or to become spiritual. It's a very difficult task. I'm very good at it, but nothing compared to Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And so their goal in writing these books were to battle against this concept that because you can't see God, he doesn't exist. Because we don't see magic in the world doesn't mean that supernatural things don't occur. And to get past that, they've used the art of storytelling. And they do it to open the mind. And one of the things that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis talked about was the fact that even though this world seems hopeless, even though when you love someone, you know eventually you will lose them or they will lose you to death, even though you know that life is a struggle, there's a part of humanity that doesn't believe that's the way it should be, that doesn't believe that that's normal. It doesn't feel normal. To lose somebody to death doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel natural. To see this world filled with wreck and ruin and struggle and heartache and strife, there's something about this life that just doesn't ring true with the human spirit. And that's why we're drawn to fantasy. A place where the hero snatches victory from the jaws of defeat. A place where supernatural events happen and transform a lost cause into victory. And why do we love those? Not just because we're Pollyannas, not just because we want to feel good, but because that resonates with something inside of us. And that itself is one of the greatest testimonies to the truth and reality of a supernatural world. is that this earthly world doesn't feel like our home. This earthly world doesn't feel right. It feels like something's wrong with it. We can feel the curse. We can feel the separation of God and humanity. We can feel the devil in the world, even if we can't put it to words. And so these men set out to write these books to combat atheism, to use fantasy and storytelling and mystery and adventure to open the minds of an atheist to supernatural things. They weren't concerned it might lead to some occultic behavior, because they know the force and power of Jesus Christ's true church, the church that dwells in each of us, not the stone buildings with the popes and the bishops and the pluribus fluffy heads, as my dad used to call them, but the true believers, people like me and you who embrace love, who have supernatural hope, who believe that healings do occur, who believe that people can be demonized and delivered from it, people who believe in an afterlife, people who believe that a simple man in Israel who had some ideas could train some disciples and through their work transform the world from evil darkness into the light of modern time. Behind it is the concept of Christian dominion. Behind it is the concept that we are going to win this entire world. We're not going to lose. We are going to win with a little help from Jesus at the very end, who, like in the Lord of the Rings, rallies us, empowers us, gives us just enough of an edge to overcome our enemies and to be triumphant. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about C.S. Lewis and his writings. C.S. Lewis didn't just write The Lord of the Rings. Many of you think C.S. Lewis was just a children's author. In fact, C.S. Lewis didn't take on the Narnia task until he was already a well-established Christian apologist. That he argued against atheism, he argued against philosophy in favor of the spirit realm, in favor, and he did it through logic and debate. And he could easily make fools of atheists and agnostics and scientifically minded people and philosophers. And he himself was responsible for winning many debates, causing people to doubt their own faith in science as the ultimate and to open their minds to the concept of the supernatural world and the eternal nature of the human soul. So, C.S. Lewis took on the authorship of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and decided to write that book and take on that project after he lost a debate to a fellow Christian. There was some doctrine that he was defending, and this fellow Christian, a Christian lady who was a renowned debater and a fellow professor at Oxford, she defeated him in an argument, in a debate, and made him look like a fool. And he never wrote another book about the Christian faith. He never wrote again about defending the Christian faith, but took on this project and redirected his energies. And I will say that one of the greatest books that you may or may not have ever heard of by C.S. Lewis is a book called The Screwtape Letters. If you're looking for an audiobook version of that, it's available on YouTube. You can simply type those words in, or you can go to my Unmasking the Dark Side playlist and find that I placed it there amongst my other videos. Because The Screwtape Letters is a masterpiece written by C.S. Lewis. I might think, having read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is just the poor man's version of The Lord of the Rings, that, and not near as brilliant if you ask me, that C.S. Lewis was just copying his friend Tolkien, that he was a fanboy of Tolkien, that he looked up to Tolkien and wanted to write something along the same lines, but more simple and easy to understand, something more relatable to the tween, to the young teenager or older adolescent. But then I stumbled across the Screwtape Letters, and in that I think is C.S. Lewis's ultimate manifestation of his brilliance. C.S. Lewis was a genius. You know, most people think spiritual warfare is boxing, but C.S. Lewis proved that it's chess. It's a giant chess match, that the demons are playing a chess match against our own minds. The Screwtape Letters is a fictional account of a series of letters, supposedly fictionally, of course, found where a head demon named Screwtape is sending letters, much like the epistles that Paul wrote to the churches. He's sending these letters to an underling and his nephew, who's a novice at deceiving humans, named Wormwood or Wormtongue. And at any rate, Screwtape calls the person that Wormwood is supposed to be deceiving and leading to hell. They call him a patient, and the language is super intellectual. It sounds like a egghead professor, and it simply is him giving you detailed instructions on how the devil deceives mankind, how he works in our relationships, how the devil's at work trying to undo us in our politics, how he's trying to undo us in our religious and faithful walk. And Screwtape, the demon Screwtape, he looks down on humanity as dogs, as beasts, and implies, which is an old Christian doctrine that's been forgotten for a long time, implies that the main reason that Lucifer and his angels rebelled against God is because they were jealous, because God put his breath of life into humanity, into these animals, and that this is why Lucifer came to deceive Adam and Eve in the garden, was to rebel against God because he was disgusted by God's gift to humanity. And this is also at play in Screwtape Letters and Screwtape's opinion and attitude towards Christians. It's a little hard to digest because, well, I listened to the audiobook. I read the book years ago, and I went back today and listened to the audiobook. It's about 3.5 hours long. And the audiobook that I got was by John Cleese from Monty Python, and it's that thick British proper accent. And he does sound like a scientific fluffy head from Oxford. This demon sounds like a scientist who is dismantling the human mind and operating with Machiavellian level of deceit and manipulation, and he's instructing his underling, Wormwood, in how to do this. And it's very entertaining. It's funny at times. It's a bit disturbing, but it's one of the greatest written treatises on how the devil works against us, what demons really think. This was fictional, but it looks like it very well could be a found relic of some demon talking to another demon about us. And it unveils the dark side in a way that no other book I've ever read does. If you've not read the Screwtape Letters, I recommend it. So then because it's written in Victorian English, it reads a little bit like Shakespeare, mixed with a high-level PhD course in English Lit. I mean, that's the thing about Lewis. He had a mastery of the proper English language that can almost seem like a foreign language to us modern Americans. So you can find another one called The Diaries of Lord Foulmouth, and the Letters of Lord Foulmouth. It's not available in audiobook, but you can download it for free off the internet. And this is a modernized, modern English reiteration of the Screwtape Letters. I've not read that one, but I've heard it recommended for those who struggle with the English accent of John Cleese in the audiobook, or the written word of the Elizabethan language that is used by C.S. Lewis. But it really is a demonstration of Lewis's brilliance. When I hear people talking bad about C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, it irritates me because I know that they didn't do the due diligence to find out who they're bad-mouthing. That these men, Tolkien for his whole life and C.S. Lewis after his conversion, are such powerhouses of Christian literature. C.S. Lewis's books, some 60 books I believe he wrote, besides The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, are some of the greatest and most celebrated explanations of Christian doctrine ever written. I don't always agree with C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, like I don't agree with a lot of Christian teachers, but I do find merit, and their vision to use fantasy and to open the minds of people to be open-minded to the spirit realm through their fiction while indoctrinating them with just the basics of Christian faith. It causes someone who was raised in atheism to read those books, and then when they encounter the Gospels, a bell goes off. Instead of sounding like mythology, to them it sounds remarkably familiar, even if they can't understand why. That their subtle infusion of Christianity into literature, undercover, was brilliant and inspired by God. Don't worry about your kids discovering magic through those books, because if you did your part in raising your kids with the Christian faith and believe in Jesus, then they will automatically see Christ and God and the end times in those stories, and the magic won't affect them. In fact, it'll open their mind to the supernatural possibilities of signs and wonders and miracles in Christian form. So I hope you enjoyed this coffee talk. If you get entertained from hearing me speak, if you enjoyed the break from the war talk and all the heavy doctrine to talk about some fantasy books and some amazing men from our past, then I hope that you support this channel financially. Buy me a cup of coffee. Thanks so much to those of you who made large donations that paid my bills this month, and even thanks to the guy who sent me $1.65 to buy me a cup of coffee. I received all of that with the intention and the nature of which you meant it. And I ask that God bless every one of you that contributes, and your contribution, great or small, is very much appreciated. And I hope you enjoyed this. You can find a link to my PayPal, to my Cash App, and to my post office box in the description of this video. And I hope you support me financially. Leave a like, share these videos, leave a comment. Keep it nice. We don't really like ugliness. Remember, no goats are allowed at the sheep pen. So don't go around butting heads. But yeah, see, tell me if these books had an effect on you. Tell me if you're hearing some of this stuff about these two men that you didn't know about, these authors. You probably didn't know that C.S. Lewis is one of the greatest Christian literature authors in history of the modern church. You probably thought he was just a child's author. His conversion story is very inspiring. Christianity is mythology. It just happens to be the mythology that's true. All right. We'll see you next time on Coffee Talk.